Thank you very much for having me today. I really appreciate it. I'm Braden Kowitz, and I've been fascinated over the past year about design culture. What does it mean to build a place where great design can thrive? And when I think about this, I think back to a television show that ran in America a long time ago called Candid Camera. This is my favorite episode. This guy is in an elevator. He's kind of unsuspecting, and he's looking a little weird, because if you notice, the other guy in the elevator is facing the back, which is not the right way to ride an elevator. Now, the producers are throwing a little bit of a gimmick towards him. They're throwing a bunch of actors in there. Now, watch his face as he realizes he might not be doing the right thing here. What's he going to do? He has decades of experience riding an elevator. Drum roll. Oh! It is amazing the power of people around us to change our behavior. And that's what got me so interested. This is group norms, and it's just one component in what makes culture. So, design culture. What does it mean? Because it's such a fuzzy concept. I've certainly worked at places that have good design culture, and I've worked at places that have bad design culture. What I can tell you, though, is what it feels like to be a designer in a place with good or bad culture. I'm an avid backpacker. So that's how I see the world often. So this is what it feels like to be in a place with good design culture. There's a path in front of you. You have a couple friends along the way, and there's clear payoff way in the background. That's where we're going. I've certainly worked in places like this, but I've also worked in places like this, where there is no path. You're not sure where you're going, and every step seems treacherous, and worse, you're feeling alone. If you have an environment like this, design is very hard, no matter how many great designers you have on your team. So, this is important to me because I work at GV, which is Google Ventures. It's Google's venture capital arm. I'm a design partner there, so my job is to help all of the companies in our portfolio, help them be better companies through design practices. One of the big questions I get from entrepreneurs all the time is, how do I build that design culture? How do I make a place where we can easily ship design to all of our customers? At first, all I could do was talk about things that I knew didn't work. So for example, I saw a lot of teams go places like this. Does anyone know where this is? Just shout it out. It's the Eames house. Thank you, Katerina. I've always wanted to go here. I'm jealous if anyone has been. But getting your team to go to the Eames house will not magically make you better at design culture. I've also seen teams really invest in their space. Sort of thinking that if we have enough whiteboards, if we have enough movable furniture, design culture will just materialize. That stuff makes working easier, but it doesn't magically make a great place where design can thrive. And in the hardest cases, I've seen design teams sort of circle the wagons. You know, they build a little tiny bubble of good culture where they can do design work in that section. But that's the only place where design happens. They can't get design throughout the rest of the organization. They often can't ship it to customers. And that means that building a design agency within your company also isn't a good way to ship design. So, what do we do? Luckily, I've had a chance to work with lots of startups over the years, and I've noticed 3 big patterns that I've seen for companies that end up delivering great design to customers. So I kind of want to walk through those today, and also talk about ways that you can sort of shift your culture if you care to. So the first principle, companies that ship great design have faith in quality. They believe that they should be building things that are good for customer, even when they can't measure how good that stuff is, which is kind of crazy, because today we live in a world that is so measurable, right? Everyone looks at ROI and click-through rates and all this stuff. All that stuff absolutely makes it easier to build products today. It's super important, but it's not the only thing. And designers don't miss that there's a whole other universe of unmeasurable value. All sorts of things that we can do that generate value for customers, but are just hard to measure. Even if you're checking for satisfaction metrics, it's just too distant from the work that you're doing. And the first time I experienced this trade-off between measurable and unmeasurable value was a long time ago. I go back in the Wayback Machine to the Google checkout button. So I designed this with a couple designers, and it's kind of like PayPal checkout. You sign in with an account and get through your merchant checkout flow quickly. we designed something simple, but the product managers really wanted this button to be clickable, right? People had to see it on the page. So we went through round and round and round of design reviews. The first design review, it got a gradient. The second one, it got a drop shadow. Third one, it got a colored logo. Who thinks this is going in a good direction in terms of visual design? Who thinks, no one? Who thinks it's going in a bad direction? Yeah, I'm with all of you. This is not going well. So I went and talked to my mentor at the time, and he was really smart. He said, Braden, give them the most clickable button on the internet. I don't know why he asked that, but it sounded like fun. And I thought, what is more clickable than blue? Well, red, obviously. But how do we make sure people really see it? We've got to put flames on it. And then how do we make sure people want to click it? Well, we promised them a free iPod. I took this back to my product managers, and we had a good laugh. And then we decided that we cared about things other than just the click-through rate on this button. We wanted to make sure people had a good impression of Google, honestly. And they had a sense of what might happen after they clicked the button, which this obviously wouldn't do. So after a couple of iterations, we came back to an earlier version of the button. And at that moment, our team really balanced that measurable and unmeasurable design. That is the kind of trade-off you need if you care about good design in your organizations. So this is my advice to you, if you're a leader in these organizations, is to have advocates for the unmeasurable. So you have people in your leadership meetings all the time that have the spreadsheets and have the metrics, and they're looking at that stuff all the time. You're probably not missing that. What organizations often are missing are people that can argue for adding value in all these other ways that are harder to measure. So if you're a leader, put these people in your meetings. If you're not, it's time to hone your skills at being a better advocate. And the best way I can suggest to do that is to get very good at critique. This is a topic that I could just go on and on about for hours, but the best pointer I can actually give you is a book by Ed Catmull about Pixar, because there's a company that cannot do A/B tests on their product. They have to get it right the first time, and the way they do it, for the most part, is developing a culture of critique and making sure they can advocate for that unmeasurable value. That's the first idea, have faith in quality. But unfortunately, you can't just hire a bunch of designers and hope that everything will go right. You actually have to hold design accountable for delivering great design. And that's because, honestly, designers, we like to focus on stuff sometimes that's not so important. We like to make things really beautiful and often forget the rest of it. There are so many products out there that designers would say, that's beautifully designed, that's great. But a lot of those products aren't around anymore, which means that something wasn't right about the design, right? So in very broad brushstrokes, there's lots of ways design organizations can add value to your business. They can add value at the surface level, which is all the stuff you normally think about with design. Is it beautiful? Is it delightful? They can add value at the user level, where they go out and talk to customers and be advocates for those customers back in your organization. And then as designers get more and more deep into the business, they can add value on actual business goals. They can balance adding value to customers and capturing value for the business. They can work on strategy and figuring out which direction the company should go. What you need your design teams to do, actually, is not just focus on that top surface layer, but actually focus on all of those different layers of design, which is a bit tricky. How do you get designers to work on some of this stuff that won't get them extra likes on Dribbble? It's hard. Then the best way I've found to do this is actually a technique I learned from the military called commander's intent. The idea behind this is that instead of telling someone what you want them to do, you have to tell them why it's important to the organization. And this is important because on the battlefield, things are extremely chaotic and communication is very hard. Things can change all the time. And if you're paying attention to that description, it sounds exactly like life in a startup, right? So you can't tell someone, I just want you to do this, you have to explain why. Here's what that looks like. Your boss might come in and say, I want a new email campaign. And what you have to do is say, why is that important? And it maybe is important because we want to bring existing users back. And why is that important? Well, because we want more revenue per user. And by connecting all of those things, you allow designers not just to focus on what does the email campaign look like, but what is the purpose of that campaign? And how can we generate value on all those levels? So that's the second idea. We have to hold designers accountable at all those levels. Okay, we hold design accountable, but I've got some bad news. Designers can't do the job alone. It's actually the case that design is everyone's job in an organization, which is radical and a big change. I don't mean that we should send engineers to color theory or make product managers Photoshop ninjas. I don't mean that at all. But I think this is an important lesson that we should take from the world of software engineering. Because if we go back in time again, back to the 70s and 80s, the world of software had a quality crisis. This was the time of blue screens of death and projects that would go over budget and projects that would go over like way too long. And they had a challenge. So the software quality movement stepped in and noticed a lot of things that were wrong with how teams were working. One of the things that they found I find fascinating is that within engineering organizations, there were often two separate teams. One team was focused on writing code and shipping things as fast as possible. And another team was focused on writing tests and making sure there was no bugs in their code. So these two teams, one focused on quality, the first one's focused on speed, the second one focused on quality. These teams never got along well. There's all this tension, as you might imagine. But more importantly, they never figured out how to deliver quality software with that tension there. Okay, what changed? What changed was they made software quality everyone's job. And if you look at an engineer today, you walk over to their desk, it's very likely that they're writing a unit test instead of just writing code. That's a dramatic departure from the work that they used to do. They're taking a chunk of their time and doing something that wasn't their job before with that chunk of time. Dramatic departure. But it gave us quality software. So now let's think about the world of product quality and design quality. We're in the same boat in many places. You often have engineering and product teams focused on how fast can we get this feature shipped to our customers. And then off in the corner, you've got a small team really caring about quality. And as you can imagine, we have those same tensions where engineers and designers and product managers often feel like they have different goals within the organization. And it's the same thing as the world of software. I think this changes, again, when we make design everyone's job, make that quality thing everyone's job in the organization. And what that means is that people are going to take a chunk of their time, and just like engineers starting to write unit tests, they're going to take a chunk of their time and do design activities with that. That might mean going through critiques, it might mean a bunch of different things, but I think the most valuable thing that you can do in an organization is give people exposure to customers. It give them a license to do that. If you're not talking to customers, tell the product managers to go out and talk to customers. If you have user researchers talking to your customers, tell the engineers to take a day off of work and listen to them. Tell everyone in your organization to do that. Because the more your organization understands what customers need, the better every single little decision gets. So those are the three basic ideas. One, that organizations that care about design have faith in quality. They believe that they should do stuff even if they can't measure if it's working or not. Second, that we have to hold designers accountable not just for that surface value, but for really adding value to the whole business. And finally, that the designers aren't in it alone. The design is an activity that the whole organization does together. Now, I am so inspired by designers because we see the world around us as malleable. I don't know if you ever worked closely with designers, but we'll put like casters on furniture that's too hard to move. We'll paint a wall with whiteboard paint before you can blink. We just see the world around us as this thing that we can change. And we know that if we change it, it makes our work life better. I want to remind us all that culture that's around us is equally powerful. It shapes our behavior and our days and how we work. And it's also malleable. We can go in and nudge it one way or the other and change the way we work and the environment that we work in. And the more we do that, the better of a workplace we get. So this is my challenge to you. Actively shape your culture. Take a temperature of what is it like today? Where do you want it to be? Try little different ways to nudge your culture. And when you find things that work, please share it with the rest of us so we can all work in better places. Thank you.